The worst year for a lot of us for our mental as well as physical health. So joining us this morning is best-selling author, coach, and fitness expert, Lisa Goldenthal.
Hello and welcome. I'm Lisa G, your host. You're at the top of your game, yet the game is changing faster than ever. Strategies that got you here aren't the ones that'll keep you here. The pressure is relentless, and the fear of obsolescence looms large. That's why I'm here. Welcome to the new podcast series, Disrupted: How to Be Gritty and Unlock Performance. This is your chance where I sit down with today's tops in business, mindset, wellness, and success to help you master disruption and thrive.
Thanks for coming, and I'll see you soon.
He's a retired lieutenant colonel, an internationally recognized keynote speaker, and the author of the 2021 release, Your Leadership Legacy: Becoming the Leader You're Meant to Be. Both his leadership talk and his book are based on his 40 plus years of leadership experience in combat, peacekeeping, operations, disaster relief, operations, and in the boardroom. Oak highlights principles that'll benefit today's leaders and inspire the leaders of tomorrow in any profession at any level of leadership. I'm so excited. Welcome to the podcast, retired Lieutenant Colonel Oakland McCulloch. Welcome.
Yeah, well, thank you, Lisa. I've been looking forward to this.
Me too. I want to jump right into the topics of servant leadership. I want to discuss that with you because it's such an important topic to me as well. What is servant leadership to you?
Yeah, to me, it really is how you go about what you're doing. And, I've been lucky over the last 16 years associated with the Army. My last 3 years as a professor of military science at University of South Alabama in Mobile, and in my last 13 here as a government service officer doing recruiting for Army ROTC, that I've had my hand in commissioning over 600 lieutenants for the Army and for the nation. And I used to tell every one of them, look, leadership is not about you, and yet it's all about you. And somebody would always say, well, Colonel McCulloch, how can it not be about me and all about me? And I said, it's not about you in the title you get or the privileges you get, or that you get better pay and you get to live in a nicer house and drive a nicer car. Leaders get those things usually, and that's okay as long as that's not the only reason you want to be the leader. If that's the only reason you want to be the leader, please go do something else because you're not going to be a good one. It is all about you and how you empower the people that you have the privilege to lead. And it is a privilege to be the leader, and how you run that organization that you have the privilege to lead. And one of the problems I see out there today, and one of the reasons I do what I do now, go around and talk about leadership at conferences and those type of things, is I see a lot of leaders out there who have forgotten that it is a privilege to be the leader.
Wow. I love that you talk about that you get to be a leader, that it is a privilege to be a leader, and that it is about you in how you lead. What do you do if you see people, for example, like micromanaging or just not empowering people, but bossing them around? Have you ever seen that happen?
Oh, all the time. And I've worked for those people. I had a boss one time who said, "Oak, leadership is on a scale. And on this end of the scale, you have that authoritarian, micromanaging, do it exactly as I tell you how to do it leader. And we've all worked for that person and we hate that person. And then on this end of the scale, you have Attila the Hun and chaos, controlled chaos, but chaos." He said, and you want to be as far down that road as you want to be toward chaos. And he said, for a couple things, he said, that's where creativity happens. He said, over here, the micromanaging guy or gal, nobody is going to be creative because they're just going to sit back and wait for you to tell them exactly what to do, when to do it, how to do it. Why should they go out on the limb and come up with any ideas of their own? On this end of the scale, where you are using all of their skills, knowledge, abilities, that's where you're going to get creativity. And he said, and this is what I try to tell everybody, the way you get to that point is you have to first create the culture of your organization the way you want it to be. And that takes time, effort, money, resources. That's not easy. Then you got to train the people to the standards you want them to meet, so that whatever you ask them to do, they can do. Then you got to give them the resources, the time, the money, the people, the equipment, whatever it is they're going to need to get that job done. Then this is where a lot of leaders fall down. You have to give them the authority to make it happen. Leaders get authority just by your title, by your position. You can give that away to people, and you should. The more authority you give away, the more creativity you're going to have. And then the last part of that is you got to get out of their way and let them do things. Will they do it exactly the same way you would have done it? Probably not. Who cares? As long as they give you what you're asked for, who cares how they got there? And the analogy that I always use is, if we got to get to the number 9, how do I care how you get me to the number 9? 7 plus 2 is 9, but so is 6 plus 3 and 5 plus 4 and 8 plus 1. I don't care how you get me to 9. Just get me to 9.
I love that outlook, because, you see so much disengagement in the workforce these days. And when you empower people to make some mistakes, just have that authority, then they're going to be having more buy-in and engagement. Don't you think?
Absolutely. That's the key there. And the reason I think we see more people moving toward the micromanager is because they're afraid to let people make some mistakes. They think it's going to affect their next promotion, their next pay raise. And it's the exact opposite. You empower people. Now, if you do that, you're going to have to accept that they're going to make mistakes. And look, we all make mistakes. I don't care who you are. Nobody's perfect in this world. I keep trying to convince my wife I am, but she's not buying it.
None of us are perfect.
No, the only perfect person who ever walked this earth, we crucified 2,000 years ago. So we are all going to make mistakes. And I had a boss who retired, a 4-star general who was a mentor of mine. And he used to tell me, Oak, I don't care if you made a mistake today. If you didn't make a mistake, you probably didn't do anything. I don't care if you made a mistake. What I care about is, what did you do after you made that mistake? Did you try to hide it? Did you try to blame somebody else for it? Or do you walk up to me and say, hey, boss, I messed up. This is how we're going to fix it. And that's the attitude as a leader you need to have. Let people make mistakes. Learn from those mistakes so we don't do those again. But let's fix it, move on, learn from it, and let's get better. And that's the way you get better.
Wonderful. So I know you talk about 360-degree trust, and what is it and why is it important?
Well, I think all leaders would come to the conclusion that you got to have the person you lead has to trust you. I mean, that's pretty simple. And let's be straight. If that one's not there, it doesn't matter what else is going on. You're not the leader. General Colin Powell, who's still the most impressive man I ever met in person, I heard him say one time, a quote of his was, when your people stop bringing you their problems, you stop being their leader, because they've lost trust in you. So trust between the leader and the person you're leading is absolute. It's got to be there. But what most leaders and most people don't understand is that trust also has to be, the leader has to trust the people they're leading.
Right.
Because when you give them a project, you got to trust that they're going to stay within your culture. They're going to stay within the left and right limits that you gave them, that they're going to do the things you asked them to do. So that's the second part of that 360-degree circle. The third part is everybody on the team needs to trust each other, that you're going to do, that your buddy who's working right beside you is going to do the right thing and make the right decisions. And then take it one step further, whoever your client is or whoever you're serving outside your organization has to trust you and you have to trust them. because nobody's going to do business with you if they don't trust you. At least I hope they wouldn't. And I hope you wouldn't do business with somebody you don't trust. So that 360-degree trust, and if any part of that circle is missing, then you got problems.
I love the parallel that you have of leadership in the corporate world and leadership in the Army or in the military, because obviously if you're out there in combat with people that you don't trust, that are just micromanaging you, then the stakes are really high in both degrees.
Oh, they are. I mean, different stakes, but they're still high. I mean, you know, it all goes back to this to me, because I get people all the time who say, well, Colonel McCulloch, you know how to lead in the Army, but you don't know how to lead out here in the civilian world. And I said, are you crazy? I said, leadership is leadership. It doesn't matter where you learned it. It doesn't matter where you practiced it. If you understand that leadership is about people and trust, you can lead any organization. And I kind of prove that. I mean, I spent 23 years as a combat arms officer in the Army, fighting our nation's wars. That's what my job was. When I retired from the Army, I ran a food bank for 2 years. You don't get any different than that. That's a 180-degree difference.
Right.
And when I took over that food bank, we were handing out 1.2 million pounds of food a year. When I handed it off 2 years later, we were handing out 3.8 million pounds, double
Wow.
the size of the truck fleet and almost double the size of the staff. Now, some of that was because the food bank I took over was right on the Gulf Coast, had 52 counties along the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, the Gulf Coast of Alabama, and about a third of the panhandle of Florida. And I
Right.
took over about a month before the BP oil spill, which shut down the Gulf. So I had to come up, which meant we had to feed some extra people that we had never fed before. So I had to come up with some ingenious ways to do that. But again, if you understand it's about people and trust, you can make things happen. And so I absolutely believe that you can lead any organization as long as you understand that.
Yeah, I think it's the same for a team, like any sports team,
Doesn't matter.
any kind of organization. It's like if you have these principles of trust, emotional intelligence, where you can empower people, listen to them, get their buy-in, that your lessons learned in the military apply to leadership everywhere.
Yeah, I absolutely believe that. And like I said, I proved it, and other people have proven it too, not just me. That I think that it leadership is absolutely transferable from one profession to the other.
I think so too. And I also wanted to ask you about legacy, because I know you've been in the game for such a long time, and all leaders want to leave a legacy. So what does legacy mean to you?
Yeah, that's, obviously that means something to me, or I wouldn't have titled my book that, Your Leadership Legacy. So to me, leadership, your legacy has two parts to it. It's a small part of what you actually accomplished in your organization. And the reason I say that's a small part is because no matter what you did in that organization, when you leave, and we all are going to leave at some point or another, one way or another, either you're
Right.
going to get fired or you're going to decide to leave on your own or you're going to die. But one way or another, you're going to leave.
Correct.
When that next person comes in, that next leader comes in and they change everything that you did. If you tie your legacy to what you did, then where's your legacy? Now, don't get me wrong. What you do is important. In the real world, results do matter, but that's a small part of your legacy. The biggest part of your legacy is that next generation of leaders that you help create, who carry on your style of leadership and the principles and the morals and the values that you have taught them for maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years in that organization. And then pass that on to the next generation of leaders, who then passes it on to the next. When I was running my ROTC program at the University of South Alabama, I had a guy who worked for me, Master Sergeant David Powell. And I say he worked for me. He was probably a better leader than I was. And one day we were talking about the significance of what we were doing, creating that next generation of leaders for the Army and for the nation. And he looked over at me and he said, sir, great leadership handed down from generation to generation is what develops great nations. And I thought, wow, what a powerful quote. And the most powerful part of that quote is this: you can substitute that word nations for anything you want. A food bank, a hospital, a university, a business, doesn't matter, because every organization in every profession needs good leadership.
I love that definition of legacy, of handing down good leadership. And people will remember you not just for the KPIs and results you got, but for the way you trained other leaders. And I think that's another great definition of leadership, is bringing up other leaders.
Right.
So I started this podcast in 2020 to help people be unstoppable. Do you have any final tips for our audience on how they can be unstoppable in their leadership?
Yeah, I do. And my father instilled this in me at a young age, and I believe in it. You got to have that winning attitude. No matter what happens, you got to have that attitude that you're going to make it happen, whatever it is you're supposed to do. And I had the privilege to listen to General Hal Moore talk one time, probably the second most impressive person I've ever met in my life, in person. And he said, life is not like baseball. It isn't 3 strikes and you're out. If you try something and it doesn't work, try something else. And if that doesn't work, you try something else. And if that doesn't work, you try something else. And you keep trying until you figure out what works. And I think if you have that attitude as a leader, then I think and as a person, whether you're a leader or not, I think that you can be unstoppable.
I love that winning mindset, because when we've all been knocked down, I mean, that's when I started this podcast. I mean, it was hard for me, and I knew it was hard for everybody else. But when you look at the silver linings of some of the things that happen and you pivot, then you have the ability to start over, and greater things can happen sometimes too. Has that ever been your experience?
Oh, absolutely. It's called life. We're all going to meet those points in your life where things aren't going the way you wanted it to go, or that you planned on it to go. And you got to pick yourself up and say, okay, where do I go from here? Let's start over. Let's make this happen the way we want it to happen. I think anybody who is successful has gone through that at one point or another. And I think it makes us stronger. It makes you want it more than you may even have wanted it in the first place. Because when things come easy to us, you take it for granted. But when you actually got to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and start over again, and still have that dream, now you got to earn it, and you got to really work at it. And I think we don't take it for granted anymore.
Yeah, that's been my experience of, like, I'm not any different than the rest of you guys, of the ups and the downs and relationships that didn't work out, and then finally getting married, and businesses that didn't work out, and then taking the lessons as I fell forward, fall down 7 times, get up 8 kind of thing.
That's right.
So
yeah, well, again, that's called life. I mean,
yeah.
Most people don't have a rosy straight line to success. It's up and down. And, one of my favorite sayings that I use all the time is, you can have the best plan in the world, but the enemy has a say. And the enemy can be, like I faced years in the Army, or the enemy can be your competitor, your, whoever. It can be anybody, but the enemy has a say. And sometimes your plans don't go as you hope they would. I don't care how good the plan was. And so you got to fall back on plan B and C and D and however many other plans it's going to take for you to get where you want to be.
I love that message of resilience and grit. Any parting words you want to leave our audience with?
Yeah, I try to always in my talks and my podcasts with, as a person, but certainly as a leader, you are going to make a difference in somebody's life every day. Every single day, you will make a difference in somebody's life as a leader. Why not make a conscious decision to make a positive difference in somebody's life. Just one. Go out and find one person every day and make a positive difference in somebody's life.
Wow.
Imagine how much better our families, our neighborhoods, our communities, our towns, our cities, our state, the country, the world would be if everybody went out and found one person and made a positive impact every single day.
I love that I asked you that last question, because to make a positive difference in somebody's life is such a wonderful message of hope, especially, it doesn't matter what time of year it is. Anytime you're listening to this. And where can people find you? I know we connected on LinkedIn.
Right. So I'm on social media. I'm on LinkedIn. That's how we got connected. But I'm also on Instagram and YouTube. I've got some videos and things on YouTube if you want to hear some other podcasts or just some clips of me speaking. And then I've got a website, www.ltcoakmcculloch.com. And it's got some more things on there that you can do. And on there, it's got a link to all my social media. It's got a book, a link to my book that you can buy off of Amazon if you're interested. And it also has my cell phone and my email address. And if you want to talk, if you want to hop on a Zoom, I'm always happy to do that.
Oak McCulloch, thank you so much. That's very generous of you. Great to have you as a guest on the podcast.
Yeah, well, thank you, Lisa. I appreciate it.